you the link to the session after the webinar later today. We will also be emailing you a quick survey following the webinar along with the recording. We ask that you complete the survey so we can continue to improve our learning series for arts facilities. Thirdly, you can hear us, but we can't hear you. Your microphones have been disabled for this webinar, but you can use your speakers or headphones to listen in. You can adjust the sound by clicking on the speaker icon at the top of the meeting as well. And then fourth, we will have roughly 10 minutes at the end of the webinar. Please use the chat box in the bottom right of the meeting room to type in any questions you have. We will answer them throughout the presentation, but as well we'll have time at the end to do a bunch, and we'll get to as many as we can in that time. Now, in case you have not heard of ArtsBuild Ontario, we are a nonprofit arts service organization that provides programs and learning opportunities that help make Ontario's arts facilities more sustainable. One of our programs is the Learning Series, which is a series of webinars, workshops, and resources that support our core programs, which are Space Finder in Canada, the Arts Facilities Mentoring Network, Asset Planner for the Arts, and our Energy Conservation Program. Partnering with us on the Learning Series is Work and Culture. Work and Culture's mission is to support the people who work in the cultural sector through lifelong career development and business skills training. They connect, create, and curate training and tools that help arts and culture professionals develop the business skills to match their creative talents. So our presenter today is Kendra Fry, who has been a general manager working in the arts for the past 15 years. She was the general manager of the iconic theatre Passe Muraille, as well as a business manager at the Theatre Centre, both in Toronto. For the past 3 years, Kendra has been the manager of Trinity St. Paul Centre for Faith, Justice, and the Arts, which is a multi-purpose community centre run by a United Church congregation and home to 14 resident companies and another 200 repeating user groups who collectively book 24,000 hours per annum. At Trinity St. Paul's, Kendra has overseen $2 million in renovations, all conducted in collaboration with lead partners, Tafel Music Baroque Orchestra. So, without further ado, Kendra, I am going to hand things over to you.
Hopefully everyone can hear me okay, and you'll let me know if you can't. Thanks for the welcome, Alex, and thank you to Work and Culture and ArtsBuild for inviting me to do this, and also for all the work, of course, that they do for the sector. I can see in the list of participants that there's lots of friends and colleagues taking part today. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that we all have things that we bring to the way that we manage our facilities and are all experts in our own rights at the various things we do, and have lots of opportunities. I would love to hear from all of you about the ways that you manage your facilities differently from how I manage mine. So welcome. The first slide here is just a quick overview of Trinity St. Paul's, in case you don't know it. So Trinity St. Paul's is really a community hub. We refer to it as a performance hall, recital hall, daycare, school, restaurant, community hub, because it is all of those things due to the many people who call us home, either as resident users or as casual users. So on the left-hand side there, you're getting some pictures that are mostly from the pretty side, the newly renovated side, and then the other side is the community side where lots of folks do their work. So Trinity St. Paul's is one of the facilities I've managed, as Alex mentioned, and so there are some things that I think are the important considerations when thinking about facility management. So to give you a sense of where today's webinar is going, here's the things that I've laid out that we'll cover, knowing that, of course, facility management is a huge topic and there's plenty more things that we could choose to talk about. So we start with culture considerations in creating your plan, facilities upgrades and retrofits, human resources, which of course is at the heart of most arts organizations, inventory and information management, space sharing, pricing, and then community collaborations. So as Alex mentioned, if you have questions or comments as we go, please feel free to type them on the right-hand side there, and I will try to connect as much as I can with all of you. So I want to start by saying a word on scope and scale when talking about facility management. It's a pretty huge topic, and it really covers from one person taking the bookings and cleaning the space all the way to the Canadian Opera Company. I mean, facilities come in all shapes and sizes. So just pulling from Space Finder Toronto itself, on the left-hand side here, we have 96 Tiers Vintage Space, which is 360 square feet. I've never been to it, but I kind of love that they chose this little panda to set in front of their backdrop there to give you a sense of the scale there. And on the right-hand side is the Four Seasons Center. So of course, how we run these places is vastly different from each other. At the Canadian Opera Company, you're going to have sophisticated automated systems that control humidity and heat, tracking power usage and providing real-time feedback to the people who manage that building. It doesn't make it more complicated, really, than the Tiers Vintage Space, because what will be happening there likely is that one person will be running all of it. So I think for today, what I wanted to say is that where we're focusing really is on the mid-level, but I acknowledge that there are things on either side. So let's imagine that you've just become the general manager of a new facility and you're coming for the first time on the first day. I think that it's a really great opportunity to pause and contemplate the culture of a venue and how that might affect how you would run it. And certainly, this is one of the things that I had to do quite a bit when going from Theatre Passmarais, which you see here on the right-hand side, over to Trinity St. Paul's. So when you look at Theatre Passmarais, the dark metal, the revealed light fixtures, the brick wall of Passmarais, they tell the audience and the company's management team what we're expecting of this venue. It's raw, you can see its guts. There's no windows most of the time. Most people have a drink during the show. The bar is a major feature upstairs. You're invited to be inside the creation process. In short, it's kind of what I would call a beer and boots kind of place, and it values its art really over its surroundings. The focus is all on that stage. Now you have a look at Trinity St. Paul's on the left-hand side. You have light wood, the upholstery of the chairs matches the paint. It's very open, no hidden nooks, no food or drink is allowed in this venue. And the stained glass invites you to contemplate the largeness of the space and its place in the history of Toronto and of people, and to be a part of that collaborative experience as well. So while culture can be changed and standards of what's acceptable in your space should always be reconsidered, pay attention to what the dominant approach is when you arrive. Take the time to fully understand why things are done the way they are and how staff and boards, if there are any, feel about that. So every facility managing and producing company has a mission as well. Facilities who program artwork are often guided by those programming principles, and that helps to determine what is done in the space. But likewise, those who don't program their own work are sometimes guided either by their dominant renters, which is sometimes the case at Trinity St. Paul's. Oh, my screen just did something very strange.
It's okay, Kendra, I'll reinforce.
Everything just went away. Sorry, guys. I can probably keep talking anyways. Right. By either your dominant renter or by your artistic director's programming approach can help to determine what it is that you create in your space and the kind of spaces that you create to share with your community at large. So basically what I'm saying is when you get there, pause for a moment. I certainly had a real culture shift to do going from Passmarais to Trinity St. Paul's, and applying the principles that made Passmarais work really well to Trinity St. Paul's would have been pretty vastly unsuccessful. So stop and think about what it is that your venue wants to achieve and how it references that by the way it looks. Sorry about that, guys. Self-back organized. So you've taken a moment to assess your facility's current culture and state of operations. Now let's have a look at key areas of operations. So namely, state of repairs and upkeep, human resources, information management, and community collaborations and connections. Plan. First of all, make a plan. Take the time to seriously consider and make a plan, and then don't stick to it. Plans are outlines. They're there to help you to keep your priorities in front of you, but they have to be adjusted for changing priorities. 2 seasons ago, I planned to replace my stained glass window sills, which were starting to degrade and needed to be replaced, and honestly still need to be replaced. Then one night in an empty building, a lath and plaster ceiling fell in. So clearly the plan had to be adjusted to manage that issue, including the hazardous materials testing, and to test the rest of the building for similar instabilities, which thankfully there were none. It was a one-off situation. However, you can't allow a plan to hold you in stasis and to not be flexible to what's happening around you. So a good plan for a facility begins with a building state of repair study, sometimes also called an engineering study. So this allows you to assess areas of risk, make a plan to repair, maintain, and renovate in advance of emergencies. The study could include things like mechanical, electrical, HVAC, building envelope. Depending on the age of the building, you may also need to commission a separate study of hazardous materials like lead and asbestos, although typically this only needs to be done once and then kept on hand and referred to as you work forward. So use this plan to cost out the next 5 to 10 years and make a plan that's executable. Look for breadth in that, allowing for visible repairs and invisible. People like to see improvements being made, so they like when there's new tile and new faucets and new screens that advertise what's happening within. But HVAC and plumbing and structure are actually usually more important, more expensive, and more dramatic when they break in emergencies, even if they're invisible. So when I'm making my 5-year plan, I try to look for a balance of the visible and invisible to allow my customers and tenants to know that I value how we look, but also that I value how we operate. So buildings, whether new or historical, Trinity St. Paul's is historical, they require a constant level of upkeep and repair, and it's often unexpected and painful. So in the left-hand photo here, this is Trinity St. Paul's just before Labor Day last year. And it's a little hard to tell, but it's under 18 inches of water after a contractor hit a water main that ran unchecked for 9 hours. Unfortunately, we discovered that the city of Toronto had at some point disconnected our disconnect at the street. So yeah, that was a relatively painful day in the life of Trinity St. Paul's, and unfortunately it pretty much decimated our daycare space in the basement right before Labor Day when, of course, the daycare was returning. So that's the pain side. And then the pride side, on the other hand of that, you have the kind of renovations or upgrades that are planned for and executed with a large team and great care. So on the right-hand side, there's the $2.5 million of renovations that Trinity St. Paul's took on along with its partners Tafel Music and Architects ERA from 2013 to 2015. So each requires a particular management style and approach, but what's common to both is that your contractor relationships are key. And I'm sorry, Alex, I've lost the presentation again. Your contractor relationships are key. You have to make sure that your contractors are on side with you and that you know exactly what they're doing and that you're communicating with them on a consistent basis. You also have to communicate with them the things that are important to you. So think about whether what is most important is on time, or is it money, or is it that things are disposed of in a green fashion? Is it about health and safety and hazardous materials? Is it about usability and functionality? It's all of these things are going to be things that you desire, but you can't have them all at once. And so you have to take a moment to consider what it is that you want to achieve. Be clear in your communications with your contractors on a daily basis, and also be clear in your communications with your user groups and renters and programmers and staff team about what it is that's happening and where you are in the process and where you're all heading and how you plan to get there together. Be totally honest, even when the news is bad. At least then people know that they can trust the things that you are saying about what's happening. So when doing major venue upgrades, these are some things that you may want to consider. So when you have a large plan like we undertook with Tafel Music, you want to think about your interrelationship development. How does the newly designed space encourage the casual interactions and loose associations that encourage innovation? This is the best kinds of spaces. Think about the new theater center, the way in which it encourages people who are not fully engaged necessarily in theater all the time to engage with a space that is primarily for creation. Those kinds of spaces are unique and they're valuable. And so you want to make sure that you create enough flexibility in order to have that kind of thing happen. Flexibility, can you change it easily to meet the changing needs of tenants and home companies? Be careful about what you do in major renovations and how much it blocks you in future. So be certain that the usage pattern that you have now is the usage pattern that you expect in the future. Image projection, what's the image you wish your new space to project? And is it an image that you and your tenants can afford to upkeep? So it's important that if you have a limited budget to upkeep what you have, that you don't create the atmosphere that you have unlimited funds. When you use expensive surfaces and expensive finishes, you tell the public that you have the ability to keep those pristine all the time. So just be somewhat careful about what the image is that you want to have there every day. And the operations, how does it ease the day-to-day? Think about where your closets are that you're going to keep your mops and your brooms in. How can you access them? Where's the water? Where are your vacuum cleaners? How are you going to make this space run on a day-to-day basis? How far do people have to travel to find help from staff? All of these kinds of things matter. So the difference between renos and upkeep, of course, is major planned projects versus everyday. So the everyday repairs sometimes are quick fixes, and they're necessary or temporary measures. And if you do it, you do those kinds of things on your way to a broader repair in that area. But if you don't have enough information to decide on a long-term repair, there's nothing wrong with embracing a quick and cheap one until you gather the information necessary to make a long-term plan. Just be careful that your Band-Aid solutions don't become your forever solutions. Always consider, though, what the manager who comes 10 years after you might think of this, and imagine how you can help them in the future. There are several times when I have opened a wall at Trinity St. Paul's and discovered what was clearly a Band-Aid solution that has now been there for 40, 50, 60, or 100 years and is creating further problems. When you have the luxury of being strategic, take the time to figure out the payback period of a renovation if it's possible. We're just at the end of a $17,000 upgrade of our lighting for efficiency, but given the used hours, the buyback period for that is only 18 months, while the lifespan of the lights is 10 years. So it's kind of a no-brainer. I know we don't always have the time to consider what the buyback is, but it is worth thinking about. Some paybacks, though, however, in the arts, of course, are not as clear-cut. It's not always a money payback. So it's hard to know if your upgrades will attract more customers. But you can send out surveys and conduct community meetings to get feedback in advance to find out what is blocking people from using your space, or what is blocking the creative team in your space from creating what they want. And so those are different kinds of paybacks that enable the art or enable your customers or your attendees to feel more connected to what they're creating. So that's kind of it on the general overview of major renovations and maintenance upkeep. Now we're going to talk just very briefly about some human resources basics. So staff culture is all important to how your venue thrives. An engaged and interested staff will help you by keeping an eye out for needed repairs and improvement and being a constant source of feedback about what's working and what's not. But let's talk a little bit about that staff function and about the basic human resources requirements in Ontario. I'm just going to take a moment for the reminder, the ever important reminder, I'm not a human resources expert. I'm not a lawyer. They're just basic things that I've learned over my years managing facilities, and I'm sure that many of you already know a ton of these things. But there were moments early in my career where I didn't know these things, and they caught me by surprise. So the list here to the left is really just to draw your attention to, if you have not thought about these human resources basics, you should probably spend some time thinking about it and finding out either online or via other resources about these basics. So prohibited grounds of discrimination. So in Canada, there are prohibited grounds, even in interviews, about questions that you cannot ask. So examples of these are race, sexual orientation, familial status, which is one that people don't always think about, religion. It's important to know what you can and cannot ask those who you are interviewing and working with. Working hours, overtime, and overnight rest. It sounds straightforward, but I got caught off guard when I went to Trinity St. Paul's that because it's not defined as purely a performing arts venue, the overnight rest requirements are different because, of course, the performing arts has had some adjustments made so that they can have less overnight rest times. But also be careful that you've applied for that dispensation for that overnight rest because it's not automatic. Violence and harassment legislation, including the duty to protect. So that's a long and complex topic, but take some time to learn about your duty to protect your staff from violence and harassment within the workplace, both from people exterior and from people interior, other staff members, right? And to think about what your policies are for how to manage those things when they come up. Ontario Health and Safety online training. So these seem to be advancing all of the time. So there's the basic health and safety in 4 steps online training that's required of all employees in Ontario. But there's also, I'm hearing now, new requirements around working at heights, and at heights is even including regular size ladders. So make sure that you're up to date on what's required on that, and that you're providing not just the opportunities, but requiring your staff to remain up to date. Police checks and vulnerable sector checks. Under what grounds should they be done? When is it an invasion of the privacy of your staff? When is it really required? And are you in contact with members of the vulnerable public? Duty to accommodate. So in the case that someone is in some fashion injured at work, what is your duty to allow them to continue to work, and how do you accommodate them? So the general statement on the duty to accommodate is to the point of undue hardship, but I haven't had a lot of success finding out exactly what constitutes undue hardship. So these are things to think about when someone comes to you and says, you know, oh, I've hurt my back, I can't do this, or I can no longer sit at the desk for that length of time, or whatever it is. And then, of course, dismissal and ESA requirements, which I'm sure you've all run into before. But even in the dismissal and ESA, keep an eye to the difference between law and case law, right? So there's what the law says, and then there's what the law has established as the standard over time based on cases that have been tried and how they have been decided within the Canadian context. So that is a pretty basic overview there of the human resources things that you should think about. One of the things I always say on human resources is when I'm keeping employee files, there's a meme on Facebook right now, and I can't remember the exact words, but basically it says when you write an email, write it as if you imagine it will be read in a deputation in court. And I think that's kind of a good standard too when you're thinking about what you put in a personnel file. That one should always imagine that that may be used, and that the people who that personnel file is about will read it and find the kindest but most precise and accurate way to explain what is happening, and to be careful to keep good records all the time of the things that are occurring with your staff. Another factor when you're talking about human resources is job design. When thinking about job design, consider the inspiration to perspiration factor. For example, how much opportunity is there for imagining new ideas, collaborating with others, taking solo control over projects, versus how much unseen paperwork and repetitive tasks and work done by oneself there is. The best jobs, I think, are a combination of both. Let's allow for the fact that different people like different jobs. So there are some people who prefer to work entirely independently, and you have to take some time to get to know that. But the majority of people like a combination of tasks that stretch you and involve interaction with other people, and tasks that can be completed even on your most tired and uninspired days that will still continue to move the organization forward. Additionally, the independent ability to choose what you do is shown in studies to increase job satisfaction. So if you have a number of options in front of you, from things that require deep thinking and research and collaboration to things that you do every single week and are repetitive tasks, then if you have the ability to select from those, then your job satisfaction is likely to be much higher. So try to give your staff a wide variety of tasks that they can select from while keeping an eye to priority sequences and not avoiding the must-dos, obviously, that have to be done. A good example of this is at Passmarais. When I was there, we had a lot of young people who really were people who wanted to be producers or designers or things of that variety who were doing fantastic jobs in all of the positions at Pass Marai. But Andy and I took on something called the Producers Project, in which we gave the opportunity to all of those people to be the producer of one of the shows in the season. And so that was everyone from our backspace technician to our marketing person to our production manager and our finance manager had the opportunity to be the producer of a show every year. And that worked really well with the team approach at Pass Marai and engendered more understanding of each other's jobs as they had to interact with each division within the company in order to achieve the goals for their production. So it was just a way to allow everybody a little bit more space within their job and a closer connection with the art. And talk for a brief moment about information. Information is power. It's true. It's a trope, but it's true. Databases are a major source of concern for everyone, and the question of the correct one to use is honestly an entire workshop to itself. So from Sumac to Tessitura to Access Design databases, I think the key is to think about what you need to track now and how that might change in the future, and to spend more time at the beginning contemplating what that all looks like than after you've created it. It's really hard to undo databases. It's easier to think about it from the start. Contractor and project tracking. Keep track of your contractors, how much it costs, where their drawings are, mark them clearly. Imagine that you're me walking into Trinity St. Paul's after 130 years with great stacks of drawings and none of them marked. And you're trying to put together the sequence again of what happened when and where we're at now. Bookings and payment systems. What volume of bookings and payments are you expecting? How can you centralize it? Who's allowed to use it? What level of changes can they make? How will you avoid syncing errors? So how will you avoid a situation where two people are working on the booking system at the same time? And how will you back it up? So our current system is kind of not serving us very well right now, and we're on our way to other things. And because of that, we're having a lot of instability. So our backup systems have become incredibly complicated for the time being. So it's backed up on the server. It's also backed up on a computer, but at the moment we're also printing out a month ahead of bookings just so we know that if things go truly sideways as we move through this difficult time, we have some record of where we were at a given moment in time. Payments, how do you track them? Where does it go after that? So after you take the payment and you put it into the computer, what's the path to the bank? What's the path to audit? How does it sync with your accounting system? And how can you close the loop to stop fraud? So the general principle on that is more than 3 points of contact if possible. So the person who accepts the money in should not be the person who enters it into the QuickBooks or the Simply Accounting or the whatever, and that person also should not be the person who takes the money to the bank. The more points of contact you have as that money passes through hands, the more times you have to discern that it is still correct, and that the less chance people can create fraud. Similarly, employee information. Think about privacy legislation and good file keeping and their ability to access the information in their files as well. Inventory management. So you've come in, you've looked at your place, you've thought about the culture, you've made a plan, you're executing the plan, you're maybe ready to invite other people to share your space with you. Inventory management is incredibly important when you're sharing your space with other people. So it sounds like the stupidest thing, but not being able to find the coffee maker can stop people from being able to work, and certainly not being able to find the vacuum cleaner or the lighting board or the whatever you can imagine really starts to add up in frustration. So choose a good place for things, label the place, train people on the place, and repeat it. Still, every Monday morning, I come in and make sure that the major things are returned to their appropriate place, because the majority of our partners work from Thursday to Sunday, and so that's the major impact time when things go missing or get broken or get lost. So now you've taken the time to think about your venue and about how you're going to help people to find things there. It's time to connect with your community and collaborate, assuming that you want to share your space. So if you build it, they will come. So make sure to ask your organization questions to help to establish the pricing, the scheduling, what's allowed in the space, what staffing is required. In many cases, all of those above decisions about space sharing may have been made long ago by your organization. So for instance, when I came to Pastorai, there was long established systems for this. But it doesn't hurt soon after you arrive at a venue to explore all the reasons why things are done the way they're done and check that assumptions still hold true. So, for example, we never rent in December because the artistic director likes to program a Christmas show. Is that still true? Has anyone asked that person lately if that's their plan? Or are they the ones that are programming a Christmas show because you never can rent at Christmas? It's hard to know what the chicken and the egg is. Is there a strategy written down about your priority sequence of who gets access to space when? So, assumably, it's your artistic director first and your programming department. What does that look like? What's their timeline? After that, are you going to flesh out what your marketing department wants and your publicity department wants before you go to rentals? Or is rental strategy important enough to you that you begin with your set rental categories and then fill in your programming around it? It's just two different ways to go about things. So you have a brief honeymoon period when you first arrive at a venue where all questions are allowed and no one finds them offensive or stupid. So use it well for your knowledge gathering. After you've thought about what times are allowed to be rented and under what circumstances, make sure that you know what staffing is required by you as the venue or can be brought by your renters, and what of your inventory is available to use. And try and find consistent ways to communicate that. I'm surprised by how often I discover that we've changed things and some staff members haven't caught up. So it's good to continue to check in with your staff and make sure that the same thing is being communicated again and again. And I encourage my staff to always refer to the renter's binder and hand out information from there rather than from the top of their heads. So then the information they hand out, we know, is always up to date. People often ask me about Trinity St. Paul's fee schedule and how our pricing works. Pricing is really important, so I'm just sharing it here. It's available on our website too. Uh, Running a not-for-profit facility is very different than a corporate facility. If you were running a corporate facility, the question of the rates of return and the enhancement of your investment value would guide the decisions on the pricing, the maintenance, and the renovation. So you would be looking at your facility and saying, how much do we need to charge in order to make our money, get the rate of return we want, and enable renovations? But in the not-for-profit world, that's not always the case. It's still worthwhile figuring out what your building costs to run per square foot and if you're recouping it. But the question of who you're renting to and at what rate may be tied to grant conditions, donors' interests, supporting special communities, and mission match, right? And so it's not as straightforward as what does your venue cost to run and how will you recoup it. There are lots of other questions of recouping. Mission match is why Trinity St. Paul's pricing structure is so complicated. Basically, the closer you get to what the United Church that owns the building would do themselves if they could, the less it costs. And then the second principle is the less ability you have to make money back from the rental, the less it costs. And so this is just the actual pricing categories. I haven't given you all of the details of what this all refers to, but there's a different rate based on if you are doing social good, if what you're doing is for peace or social justice, if it's an arts rehearsal. Basically, the Trinity St. Paul's byline is faith, justice, and the arts. And those are the three main priorities. And the further you get away from those priorities, the more it costs. But also, the bigger your event is, the more it costs, because if you're going to do a major concert with a cocktail party after, that's more impactful than a single rehearsal. The complicated structure, I think that the good thing about it too, though, is that it allows for some staff discretion. And the staff at Trinity St. Paul's is very proud of their ability to assess what the community's needs are, and meet our mandate while also making enough money to keep it running. And allows us to be contributing members of our community. The other thing you're not seeing here is the tiered approach to booking. So we choose to book things that are at rate 1 in the sanctuary on an 18-month timeline, where everything else is on 6-month timelines. So because the sanctuary requires the most other rooms along with it, is our highest rental rate, and is where most of our artwork is done, booking groups in a priority sequence based on how long they've been with us can begin booking those 18 months out. Whereas if you're conducting a dance class for half an hour on a weekly basis in the studio, you can't book until 16 months out. So it allows us to focus on mission, but also bring in bigger money up front, while letting less wealthy groups have repeating short weekly events with not a whole lot of intrusion, really. Maintaining good relationships. So you've set your space up for sharing. You've told people where things are and how much it will cost. Good relationships are based really on caring deeply about your partners. And caring deeply about your partners is sometimes, not sometimes, most of the time, just about having really good communications. So it's important to have clear pricing and contracting and scheduling. There's nothing more infuriating than calling a facility and asking if you can book with them and being told that they're not sure and they're not sure how much it will cost. People want set answers and they want to know that you know. Similarly, quick response times are incredibly important. We typically respond within 12 hours or less, which is pretty good for a place that is technically still a church. But the faster you respond, the more that people know that you value them. And engagement and interest in what is being created. So tonight I'm going to the opening night of the Toronto Storytelling Festival, an awesome new thing, not new apparently, sorry, an awesome thing that's happening in the city right now that that Trinity St. Paul's is one of the venues for. So I will go to the opening night because I want to know about what they're doing and about all the other venues. And I want to have a deep understanding of what they want to create in our space, so that we can continue to have a long-term partnership that deepens by my understanding. And perhaps later on, as I get to know them better, there'll be opportunities for them to connect with our other renters and engage in other ways in what we do. And a something more offer. So what is the thing that you are offering them that other people can't offer them? And how can you make that very clear to them that you have something that is better? So better is relative, right? So Trinity St. Paul's something more offer is about faith, justice, and the arts. It's about a community that is focused on that, and knowing that the majority of the renters there are deeply engaged in those considerations, and to some extent in political activism around those things. And so the something more offer is the casual collisions that happen there and the doors that it opens within their operations to create new things together. And I think that is what I have to say for now. Can we take some questions?
Just a reminder to everyone, if you do have a question for Kendra, to type it in the chat box. So we have a few minutes to answer anything that might be on your mind that came up for you during the presentation. And thank you, Kendra. That was great.
Oh, no problem. Sorry, it went a little faster than I expected, but there you go.
More time for discussion. So I'll turn things back over to you to field.
Sure, I see some people are typing, so I'll just wait to see what we've got here. What types of plays were produced in the project? I assume you're talking about the Theatre Passmarise Producers Project. So for the years that I was there, all of the plays were produced within the Producers Project. So Passmarise entire season was managed by each of our staff members as independent producers, and they would select amongst themselves which project best suited their timelines and their interests. Yes, the slides will be, oh yeah, wait, Alex, you said that this was being recorded, but it'll be sent out as well?
Yeah, yes, I was going to ask you to separate email, but if you're all right with it, we'd love to send the slides out to participants.
Yeah, that's fine.
Great, so yes, we will email it with the
Yeah, cancellations. That's funny. I was talking with a group of churches about this yesterday. Um, it's a tricky question. So when we're talking about the sanctuary, which is a high use space, highly desirable and expensive and needs to be booked well in advance, when you book, you pay 40% up front. And so at the moment of booking, it sits in our system as a held space, and it's not yours until you pay 40% or until someone else asks for it. And if someone else asks for it and you can't produce the 40% within 2 weeks, then it goes over to the next person. And then basically they pay the rest when they arrive. For our casual hourly bookings, if it's not a repeating hourly, they're paying as they come and we're taking our chances, but we're well enough booked that it's not a problem. For ones that are repeating, they are paying 20% in advance and then each time that they arrive. So, yeah, it's a good question, Jane. We do lose a little bit on that. Margot, can you share what your current booking? Yeah. My current booking database is EMS, and I don't honestly know what I'm moving to, Margot. It's a real challenge at the moment because what we do is a bit odd. And I'm trying to work with EMS to make it work to function better for us because part of the problem has been lack of updates and lack of training. So I haven't made a decision yet. Have you any stories about facilities managed and maintained by volunteers? Yes, there's a fantastic facility called Kingsbridge St. Joseph, which is outside of Goddard in southwestern Ontario. And that community took over their Catholic church after the diocese didn't want it anymore and has made it into a multi-use venue. And it is being maintained by a group of core volunteers of 10, but the rest of their volunteer group is 120. And I'm happy to connect you with them if you want to know more about what they're doing, because they're amazing and they hit their break even mark 1 year into their time working together. What is the best way to find a space? Susan, that's so funny. I had this conversation 3 times this week. Uh, in other work I'm doing with Faith in the Common Good, which is interested in how faith buildings connect with the common good, we're working with commercial real estate groups to try to connect groups up. And it looks like along maybe with the Toronto Arts Council, I might be doing something to try to help to connect artists who are seeking with space with faith groups who have excess space. So look for that in the future because I'm probably going to do a matchmaking thing sometime in the next 6 months because it's the problem that's coming up constantly. And there are a lot of faith groups with excess space right now. I don't know EventPro, Angie, so I'll come over and hear more about that because I'm in the research process of that. Alex, what's 13 Hats?
It's also a booking software that some of our smaller arts venues and medium arts venues are using. So it does a lot of the things that Space Finder too, which is a great way to look for space in your community.
Yeah,
It can also perform some of those same functions, but under one platform. So it's relatively cheap, and I can send out these links too as part of our follow-up.
sure. Jane, insurance I've managed 2 different ways. So at Trinity St. Paul's, we worked with Culture One and Steve Beatty, who I highly suggest that you connect with. And Steve provided us with an online forum in which people who were renting Pass Marai could go online and get insurance right away that met their short-term user needs. At Trinity St. Paul's, the United Church of Canada covers things that are short-term users as long as they are not exercise-based or child-based, and they don't cover the sanctuary because that's considered larger. And so they also, I'm working with them to create an online forum as well for people to be able to go on and access insurance. But essentially, we're requiring $2 million of liability insurance from user groups who are either using the sanctuary, doing exercise things, or doing things that involve children, or things that are otherwise seem dodgy, serving alcohol. Sorry, dodgy is not the right word, but that provide insurance challenges. Okay, so then Susan Worthington is telling us that the National Ballet School also uses EventPro. So it looks like we all need to look into EventPro a little bit and see if it could be helpful for us. Yeah, so the insurance thing I think comes up time and again, and you're going to find that user groups don't want to have to deal with insurance. I was sent a link the other day to a booking system online that suggested that they would provide insurance to the groups who booked online for us, but I'm not sure I trust it. I like to be somewhat in control of the insurance situation within our building.
Looks like Janet is typing and has a question for you, or not. That's all right. Oh, Janet's back.
She was typing and then not typing. Trying to think about if there's other things I want to say. I mean, there's so many topics on facilities management.
Insurance might be another topic. Go ahead. Sorry.
I think one of the other things to think about when you're sharing space with people is what of your things you lend out and what the value of those things, the true value is, right? And so it's one thing to lend out a riser. It's somewhat hard to break and not horribly expensive to replace. It's another thing entirely to lend out a very big projector. So be careful about what you lend out and at what rate, and make sure that you're lending it at a rate where you can continue to replace it. Sure, yeah, it is challenging with smaller groups that don't regularly host events and maybe don't have a full grasp on presenting. But I think that both at Passmarais and Trinity St. Paul's, that's a big part of my job, is to spend the time with people. So when people are trying to do complicated things and obviously haven't done them before, I will take the time to go through with them their schedule and the rooms they're using and how they're going to move the people. Also because I want the experience for them and everyone else in the building to be pleasant. And so if we have people running willy-nilly, not knowing where they're going and what they're doing, it really affects the vibe of the building. So we're just better to spend the time trying to help them. Storage space. We have a horrible little space called the casual storage, and it is offered on a no guarantees basis. So it's a locked space, and they can leave their things there. It's not a very large space, and it gets cleaned out once a year, and we give notice in advance, and inevitably someone loses something out of it or things get stolen, but that's the best that we can do. Articulating rates. Not sure I understand that question, Janet. I'm assuming you mean, do I find it hard to articulate rates to small user groups? Sometimes, yes. But we've all been them too and know how little money they have, and we just have to stand by what our policies are and why. I don't, Jane. I don't have a health and safety policy that is applied to other users in the building. I have a health and safety policy and set of procedures that's applied to Trinity's folks. I don't for other users. But also remember that in our sanctuary, we have a technician who's running all of that for them. So no one is going up a ladder who is not already under my staff auspices. So they're also not cleaning anything unless they're my staff. So there isn't a whole lot of things that they can do. There is a binder that has our violence and harassment protocols, and I send those out once a year or so to our user groups to remind them about the violence and harassment protocols in the building. Greg is telling us about the opera booking system. Yeah, so this is good. We're all getting things to look into to see what suits our needs the best. I don't know. I'm curious, Jane, too. I wonder if anybody else has a health and safety policy that applies to their on-site users. I mean, we have a joint health and safety policy that with Taffel Music and with all of our residents because they're there all the time, but not with casual users because I don't know how I would police that. The Trinity St. Paul's offsetting fund is the rates. So those rates are substantively below market. It's about 30% below market for in Toronto on the subway. And so the subsidizing is built in. Everything is being subsidized there. So we don't offer anything more than that because that's already at break-even point. So we're running based on break-even. We're not running to profit. What would be a good way to market a small flexible space? Well, may I direct you to Space Finder? I don't know, Baker, what market you're in, so I don't know whether Space Finder is available to you, but that's an option. I also tend to send out mailings to groups who I know book spaces similar to ours that aren't booking with us. I do a lot of going to events where people who might like to book are and just talking about how awesome Trinity St. Paul's is. I also use Facebook a fair amount. So when I get a good review that mentions the space, so when one of our user groups, or in fact the church, gets a good review for something they're doing that mentions the space, then I use that as an opportunity to do a Facebook campaign. I've never done a Twitter campaign, but Twitter keeps telling me I should. So I'll have to look into that at some point. I don't know if anybody else ever has. Trying to think of other ways to market a small flexible space. I think don't discount the mom and dad market. There are lots of mom and dad gathering groups that need spaces, and so I will often look into Help I Have Kids or parenting magazines and see if spaces similar to ours are being marketed there, and how I might do ours in the same way.
You can also check out our marketing webinar that we did earlier on in the learning series.
Aha.
There's a link to the recording on our website, which you can access at artsbuild.ca.
Oliver, yeah, I just got information from thisopenspace.com, and they were the one who was offering to provide insurance as well. But I've been trying to communicate with them, and I haven't had much success yet. So,
and they're a little bit different too than Space Finder, which is, we've heard of them and we've met them. They also do charge a fee for listing, I think, accepting transactions over their site. So they take a cut of your rental, and
yeah,
they do actually have that relationship with your renter too, because it looks like it's almost like a space owned by this open space, which is the
yeah,
feedback we've received from
that's
our
the trick
training.
for us, was about mission match. And so what I wanted to talk to them about was mission match, because there are not a lot of things United Church doesn't allow, but there are a few, not very many, but a few. And also that I wasn't clear on the accounting paths and whether we were going to be able to sort it out with our finance department. And so I wanted more information about how the financial reporting went of it.
I will say though that this open space has been successful in getting corporate clients for our arts organizations, so
Yeah.
it's definitely up the bottom line. So I don't want to discount
Yeah,
it
that's
too
why
bad.
I'm looking into them. Yeah. Yeah, there's a
Yeah,
reason I'm looking into them.
yeah. So
But
promoting
yeah.
the higher rates on that side, I think, is key. Yeah, Kendra and I, we talked about this earlier.
Yeah, it takes more than one methodology, right? Different methodologies for different things. That's also why I mentioned earlier that I want to do a matchmaking thing, because what I want to help arts groups to do is make longer term matches with, at the moment, faith groups, because it's what I happen to be working on, so that they can have consistent office space with the availability for flexible rehearsal rental space. So I'm just working on coming up with exactly how that looks, because I don't want it to be cold matchmaking. I want it to be warm matchmaking. I want them to know a little bit about each other in advance.
It's a cool idea. You'll have to tell us more about it.
Yeah, this next couple of weeks I'll figure something out. We own everything, Jane, except for the lighting system, which is owned by Tafel Music. And so we collect rent on behalf of Tafel Music for the maintenance of the lighting system. So we didn't buy it, we don't maintain it. We collect the money and give it to them, and they keep it up to scale and maintain it for us. The rest of what we have in our space is owned by us. It's really nice seeing so many people I know on the webinar. It's kind of like sitting around the bar talking about things.
You're making us laugh.
It's true. I like seeing people I know, even if I'm seeing them virtually.
It's funny because Angie Stellantonio is down the street from you, so you can
I know,
actually
right?
walk over and
We
chat
stop
about.
by and see each other at the Second Cup sometimes. And we had a whole bunch of their kids the other day when they unfortunately had the problems with the threats. You mentioned you only take small bookings 6 months in advance. Do you give any priority to historical renters? Yeah, absolutely. But the priority sequence is always the same. So, uh, 18 months out, big groups book the sanctuary. Then 6 months out, the groups who are currently booking with us are booked back into their slots if that's what they desire. And so the practical effect is that most groups who are running typically a 10 to 12-week series of classes will probably lose one each session in which they can't have their class at their regular time or maybe in their regular room because a sanctuary booking has overrode that. But it's never more than one and they know in advance. So when they send out their updates to their user groups, that one is already gone. We don't change it after they've sent out their things. I've never had to cancel an event because of a church funeral. Written into all of our contracts is the possibility that I might, but we don't, because the thing is that the sanctuary is it's used mostly for classical music, and so most of the time people are coming in at 4 or 5 in the afternoon and then doing an event through the evening, and so we can fit in a morning funeral and then do the night. So there are several times we've had to do that, and once or twice where we've had to move TAFL music to either another room in the building or to another venue for rehearsal because they're one of the few that rehearse from 9 a.m. in order to fit in a funeral. But it's always worked out. There's usually we have quite a lot of spaces, and so we have a fair amount of flexibility of how to move people around. Although that does get harder the busier we get, and it's something we're conscious of that the success of the last couple of years is making it harder to be flexible. And I think I have taken up our time. Am I correct?
Yes, I
Oh,
was
a
just
minute
about to
or
jump in, so we're on the same page. Thank you so much, Kendra. It's great to see so many questions, both diverse and tackling the three core topics we chatted about today. Just before we sign off for the afternoon, I did want to let you guys know that Space Finder is available in many regions across Canada. So it is a online matchmaking tool that matches artists with creative space that is available to rent, and it's free for both parties to use. So I encourage you guys to sign up if you're not already. Where Space Finder is located in Toronto, Hamilton, Waterloo region, York region, Simcoe County, and three more upcoming Ontario locations. So stay tuned for those. And then we're also in Alberta, British Columbia, and Manitoba with our local leaders doing a great job out there. Now, I would also like to thank our support from our funders from the Government of Canada, the Ontario Trillium Foundation, and the Ontario Arts Councils for the Learning Series. Stay tuned for more Learning Series information on our website, which you can look up at artsbuildontario.ca. Thanks, everyone, and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everybody. This was fun. Bye now.